President Joe Biden's sole surviving son, Hunter Biden, was convicted today on 3 felony counts. They're related to possession of a gun while using narcotics. A Delaware jury of his peers found Hunter Biden guilty of lying on a federal form while applying for a handgun, lying to a gun dealer, and illegally possessing a firearm for 11 days in the year 2018. Today's verdict marks the end of a painful chapter for the Biden family, with witness after witness detailing an incredibly troubled period in Hunter Biden's life, a time when he was addicted to crack cocaine, a time when he was in and out of rehab with a mountain of financial problems. Several members of the Biden family have attended court in support of Hunter, including his sister, his wife, and his mom, First Lady Dr. Jill Biden, seen here walking out of court today with Hunter after the verdict was read. Hunter Biden's defense had denied that Hunter had deliberately lied about his drug use when he filled out a federal form for a background check. They sought to poke holes in DOJ's attempt to prove that Hunter Biden was an active drug user. That defense on Hunter's part fell short today, but Hunter Biden's attorney, Abby Lowell, said that they will pursue, quote, all legal challenges available. No sentencing date has been scheduled, and the New York Times reports this, quote, he could face up to 25 years in prison, but first-time offenders who did not use their weapons to commit a violent crime typically receive no jail time. In a statement, President Joe Biden says this, quote, as I said last week, I am the president, but I'm also a dad. Jill and I love our son, and we are so proud of the man he is today. So many families who have had loved ones battle addiction understand the feeling of pride seeing someone you love come out of the other side and be so strong and resilient in recovery. As I said last week, I will accept the outcome of this case and will continue to respect the judicial process as Hunter considers an appeal. Jill and I will always be there for Hunter and the rest of our family with our love and support. Nothing will ever change that. That's where we start today with some of our most favorite reporters and friends. Former top prosecutor at the Department of Justice, MSNBC legal analyst Andrew Weissman's here, plus former senator and co-host of MSNBC's How to Win 2024 podcast. Claire McCaskill's back. NBC News White House correspondent Mike Memoli is here. He's outside the courthouse in Wilmington. And joining us at the table, MSNBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin. Mike Memoli, I start with you.
Well, Nicole, over 17 years that I have covered President Biden and his family, I have seen them come together to celebrate the greatest of triumphs together. His selection as Barack Obama's running mate in 2008, election nights, inaugurations, those primary nights in 2020, and ultimately his inauguration as president. But I've also, over the course of all these years, seen them come together and have to, in a very public way, endure some of the hardest times together. I think back to the moment in 2015, when I was in the gallery of the State House here in Delaware, when then Vice President Biden, standing with his son Hunter, received well-wishers for over 5 hours at his son Beau's casket side as he laid in state at the Delaware Capitol. Today certainly doesn't compare to that, but it was really striking for me inside the courtroom, the moments after that guilty verdict came down, just to see the look of shock and frankly, grief on the face of Hunter Biden's aunt, Valerie Biden Owens, who helped raise him after the death of his mother in 1972 in that accident that Hunter was also critically injured in. His mother, who couldn't even make it to the courthouse in time, the verdict came in and was announced so quickly, but went right to join her son in the hold room. And then to see them come out together, to hold hands, to get in a car, and now President Biden literally in the air as we speak, making his way to join the family at this moment. It is something that I've been talking to people close to the president over the last few weeks that has really made this especially difficult for them, that they've had to now relive some of the most difficult times in their family dating back to 2015 through 2018 when this gun was purchased in a very public way, in a way that may not have had to happen if Joe Biden had not run and been successful in winning the presidency. But now this is a family that will close ranks together. Our colleague Sarah Fitzpatrick, who has been really unparalleled in bringing us inside Hunter and his legal team as they've been going through this as well, sharing that he really told his team they had nothing to apologize for, that he was so grateful for the love and support of his family. They had nothing to apologize for, and that the only moment he did choke up was when he talked about how much he loved his parents and he loved his wife. This is a family that will now come together in this moment, as they have through so many other trying times before, and face what comes next.
Claire McCaskill, some of my understanding of this is from Mike Memley's extraordinary reporting, some of it from my own, but I know the very decision to throw his hat into the ring, to run for president, one of the hinge points was around not whether Hunter Biden's fight with the disease of addiction would be a political liability, but really whether the run and the scrutiny would be damaging, would be something too hard for the family, too hard for Hunter. This has to be, as a parent, the worst nightmare come true. And there's something about President Joe Biden's stoicism at a moment when one of the two parties in America is engaged in a fully frontal war against the rule of law. The other has sort of stoically supported and embraced and wrapped both arms around the rule of law and his son at the same time. I'm not sure it's a moment with a parallel in American presidential history.
Yeah, and what a contrast. First and foremost, I think I need to state the obvious, and that is that Joe and Jill Biden have been role models for parents of addicted children. Them showing their love and support, even when it was difficult in many ways, never backing off their unconditional love, and having such pride in his recovery. And this is a story that's being told over and over again throughout this country, is how do families deal with addiction? How do they do the right things? How do they keep from doing the wrong things? And once again, the Biden family has shown that they can be the kind of role model that makes one proud. You compare and contrast that. You have a first lady who was there for her son, even though it was very difficult and logistically difficult, and especially with her coming back and forth from France to be with him. But she was, despite his moral failings, she was there showing her support. That didn't happen when Donald Trump was in court on conduct that stemmed from his moral failings. Melania was nowhere to be found. Last seen exiting Trump Tower with Louis Vuitton suitcases. It is quite a contrast. And I don't think this trial will help Donald Trump in any way, because it shows exactly what Joe Biden said after Donald Trump's conviction, that we have to have faith in our judicial system, that no one is above the law, and that a jury of 12 ordinary people looks at facts, not political spin, and decides whether someone has broken the law. And the fact that he's going to respect this verdict, even though he could wipe it out with a stroke of a pen, even though he could have kept it from happening with a stroke of the pen, tells America what they need to know about the man who occupies the Oval Office.
Andrew Weissmann.
I'm going to pick up where Claire left off, because I don't think we have a greater example of who Joe Biden is than the combination, as you said, Nicole, the unique combination of the personal with the sort of political and the adherence to the rule of law. If people could just step back for one moment and imagine that you as a parent, as a father, as a mother, have the power to get rid of the criminal problems that your child is facing. You have the power to order the Department of Justice to dismiss a federal case. You have the power to pardon that person. And just think how painful as a parent it is to watch that process go forward. But you know that what separates this country from an autocracy, from Russia, from all these countries where there is no rule of law, it's why you went into government. It's why you do everything you do for 80 years on this planet. You have that principle guiding you, even in the face of what is such a devastating matter personally. it's really hard to fathom what that family is going through. And to be clear, this is not to say Hunter Biden did what is true what David Weiss, the special counsel, said, which is these are consequences based on his own personal choices that he engaged in this conduct. But that's not really what this issue is, because that's the small picture. The big picture as to why people should care is the combination of that personal tragedy, those personal decisions with how Joe Biden and his family are dealing with this. And the contrast is so clear in terms of decency and principle and transactional guidance in terms of how you view the world. It could not be starker. And it's, you know, it's you're seeing sort of such a sad day on a personal level, but you're seeing such an uplifting day in terms of sort of heroic action in terms of what it means to live a principle. And that's what we're seeing.